Hi and welcome back to this second video tutorial on getting started with the IBM Smart Cloud Enterprise. In this video we're going to show you how to provision Linux instances onto the IBM Smart Cloud. So to start with, we're already logged in and we've gone to the control panel and instances pane, and from here we're going to hit the add instance button. So once you hit the add instance button, you're presented with two different options, view and data center. So initially we need to make sure that we've selected the correct view. So this effectively filters out all of the assets that I can actually provision onto my Smart Cloud account. So public is the global public catalog. My images are images that I've actually taken snapshots of and stored for future provisioning, and shared images, which is images that may have been I've been allowed access to from other people using other Smart Cloud accounts. So we're going to start off with public, because that's the easiest way to get started, and we're going to select a data center. So these are all the data centers around the world that we can run instances in locally. So we're going to choose our local data center, which is Einigen, Germany. So once we've selected Einigen, Germany, we are then presented with a list of all of the pre-built, pre-customed images options that IBM have built and fully support on the IBM Smart Cloud. So from here we've got some IBM classics like BPM, Cognos, Big Insights, DB2, WebSphere, and a whole load of other images. Worth mentioning at this point, supported operating systems are Linux with SUSE and Red Hat variants, and Windows Server 2008 R2 and Windows Server 2008 R1, along with Server 2003 R2 and R1 as well. So nice little grouping of operating systems we can choose from. So we can choose one of these pre-built images that we can provision and then have an up and running DB2 server in minutes, or an Infomix server, or any of the other options that we've got here. Or we can scroll to the bottom, which is what we're going to do today, and actually just deploy a completely blank operating system that we can then customize and do whatever we would like ourselves. So we're going to select SUSE Linux Server for this. We're going to select an x86 version, and then we're going to hit next. Okay, so this screen allows us to enter all the variables required when provisioning the server. So if we start from the top, we're allowed to put in our name. So we're just going to call this Test Linux. This name needs to be unique within your Smart Cloud environment, so you can call it anything you want as long as you haven't used the name already. Next down is quantity. We can't actually vary that from here, but we can vary it with other applications, which we'll go into more detail within other videos. A server configuration itself, we have copper, bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. As we go up the range of servers, or the specific hardware configurations, we increase number of vCPU, amount of memory, and the size of local disk. For the purpose of this, we're actually just going to use a copper instance, but we could just as easily use any other. We can choose to use minimal local disk space, so if we're intending to use purely just the local disk for the operating system, then all our application data is going to sit on a persistent disk, which we'll come on to in just a minute. We can actually tick that box, which means that we only provision the 4 or 6 gig of server install image, rather than using the whole 60 gig and having the majority of it sitting there doing nothing. But for now we're just going to leave that unticked. So the next thing is keys. So when we're actually accessing the Linux instances, we need to provide a key so that we can maintain security through public-private key authentication. So we don't actually use passwords to log into the servers. We actually use public-private key authentication. So part of this is during the provisioning time, the provisioning software in the back end of the Smart Cloud will actually dump on a very specific key onto your instance in the cloud. You will hold the other half of the key, and then that's how you effectively actually authenticate to the instance when you connect. So I have a number of keys that I use for all different types and purposes of instances. But for the purpose of this video, I'm actually going to go through building and actually working with a brand new key for the very purpose of showing you how you'd actually convert it into a format that you can then use in Putty to be able to actually authenticate up to the server using Putty as an SSH client. So the first thing we need to do is hit add key. So we're going to call it the same name as the server that we've just been working with, so we'll call it test Linux. We then hit generate key. So what this is effectively doing is generating a completely random key for you, and then it gives you the option to download it. At this point, this is the only point at which you'll be able to actually download this key until you've accessed the server itself. So if you don't download it now, you've effectively just orphaned the server on the Smart Cloud and you'll have to start this whole process over again. So download the key and make sure you remember where you actually download it to. So I'm literally just going to download it to my downloads folder. One other thing to mention is when you download the key, it doesn't actually download as test Linux. It downloads as IBM Cloud underscore username underscore 1 because I've downloaded ones in the past underscore RSA. So it's always worth remembering that specific name, and if you can't, go in, change the name of the server so that you can actually remember what it's called, or change the name of the key so you can remember what it's called. So X that off, that's all downloaded now, and close. So going further down, we come on to networking options. So when we're doing networking on the Smart Cloud, we have two different options. We can use public virtual networks or public networks, or we can use private virtual networks. So inside of our test and demonstration environment, we only have public internet networks available. So we only have one in the drop down. But if you did have more, so if you'd gone and actually bought separately a private network from IBM as part of your Smart Cloud bundle, you can then provision that as the primary IP address and then select system generated, so whether it picks one up randomly or statically generated, and then you can actually add your reserved IPs one at a time onto the actual server. So what is this gives you the capability to use your predefined pre-provisioned IP addresses on your servers and give those servers either 100% public or 100% private access. You can then go in and add secondary NICs, and you can do that via actually going onto the server or inside of some of the other applications that will show you on how to provision instances and entire topologies to the Smart Cloud. But for now, we're literally just going to use a public internet address, and we're going to leave it as system generated, so it randomly generates an IP address. Okay, the last thing, the variable that we can actually customize at this screen is persistent disk. So persistent disk is something that we'll go on to in more detail in a later video, because we actually have to go to a different tab to provision it. But whilst we're here, we can literally add an extra persistent disk, so that should we ever delete the server disk, so when we actually delete the server, should we not want that data to be destroyed, we can add a persistent disk. So we have one called test storage, mount disk. We can add a mount point, or we can leave it blank, add disk, and we've now effectively got that storage ready to go so that we can actually use that with this server. And if we ever delete the server, test storage will maintain consistent and persistent, so we can actually remount that up to another server should we want to do that, basically. So we're going to mount test storage, close, hit next, and we're left with the summary page. So the summary page is obviously some of the variables we've put in and some of the static fields that have sort of been generated, such as the image ID, which is the serial number of this particular virtual instance, price, networking, storage, names, things like that. Hit next one more time, agree to the terms and conditions, and submit. This takes a few seconds just to submit the job to the IBM provisioning workflow. Once this has occurred, we can drop straight back into the control panel and just wait for that instance to to actually come active, and then we can start logging into it and using it.